Hey guys, it's Saga from TechWorks, and it is time to check out the triple cameras on the Mi A3. When it came out, the Mi A1 had one of the best dual camera setup in the budget segment. A year later, the Mi A2 took the camera quality a few steps further. Do you think this Mi A3 will follow the legacy of having one of the best set of cameras in a budget smartphone? Let's find out. Normally, I like to take some time for making these videos, but you guys have been requesting this video ever since I posted the unboxing. So I went out on this weekend and took a lot of image and video samples with this Mi A3 in various lighting conditions for this video. I also wanted to include Gcam samples in this video itself, but then the video becomes too long. So soon after this video goes live, I will start working on a video where I compare the images shot with a Gcam mod for the Mi A3 with the ones shot with its native camera app. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, you won't miss out on any of the amazing videos coming up on this channel. Let us take a quick glance at the camera specs on this phone. Like on most of the recent smartphones, primary camera on this phone gets a 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor with f1.79 aperture. Next camera gets a 8 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and an ultra wide angle lens with 118 degrees field of view. Third and the final camera at the back gets a 2 megapixel depth sensor with f2.4 aperture. You can shoot 4K 30fps and 1080p 30 and 60fps videos with both the 48 megapixel primary and 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera. There is no optical image stabilization, but the 1080p and 720p 30fps videos do get electronic stabilization. At the front, the Mi A3 gets a 32 megapixel selfie camera with f2.0 aperture and a 79 degree field of view. So with all of the camera specs out of the way, let us now get to the interesting part, the image and video samples. Daylight images from this 48 megapixel primary camera are pretty detailed as you would expect. It also handles the overall exposure of the scene nicely. This good bright light did not last very long, but even with all these clouds around and in uneven lighting conditions, these shots turned out pretty good. You can see some noise in the darker areas when we zoom in, but in these diffuse lighting conditions, we would get similar results from any smartphone in this price range. Colors seem to be accurate for the most part, but when you look at these images on the screen of the Mi A3 itself, they might look a bit oversaturated. The images in themselves are not saturated as you can see here, but the display on the Mi A3 is calibrated in such a way that anything you see on it seems a bit more vibrant than it is in real life. By default, dynamic range of the primary camera is decent at best, but you can turn on the HDR mode to get even better results. Be aware that sometimes turning on HDR will mess up the exposure for some reason, like it did in this image. I had to take this image 4 times for the phone to get the exposure right. I thought this was a one-off thing, but it kept on randomly happening every now and then, and some of the HDR shots just turned out really bad. I think the phone is not able to stitch the multiple exposure layers correctly or something like that, resulting in the contrast and exposure in some of these images being all around the place. But whatever it is, Xiaomi needs to fix it with the next software update on a priority basis. Now when the HDR mode does work, it does a good job of bringing up the shadows and preserving the details from the highlights. As we zoom in on this image, you can clearly see how much details the HDR mode brought back from the shadows. Now the multiple lenses at the back give you different focal lengths, so you can take wide angle image like this or switch to the normal lens and get a completely different composition all by standing at the same exact spot. There is also a 2x mode, but there is no 2x telephoto lens at the back, so all this mode does is digitally zoom in on the images being captured by the primary camera. Here is another set of images showing what the wide and normal lens can do. Now as fun as it is to have a different perspective of the scene via a wide lens, this lens is not very sharp, especially around the corners. First of all, it's just an 8 megapixel sensor, so it doesn't capture too many details to begin with. But then most of the companies using these wide cameras don't couple them with best quality lenses, so we lose a bit more details there, and these wide images are nowhere as sharp as the images from the primary camera. So if I was getting this phone, I won't get it for its capability to shoot wide images alone. Next we have a comparison between the native 48 megapixel images and the 12 megapixel ones which use pixel binning. There is a small difference in the amount of detail that are being shown in both these images, but honestly, you won't even notice them unless you zoom in 3 to 4 times. These 48 megapixel images are at least 3 times larger than the 12 megapixel ones in terms of storage. So unless you are trying to capture a landscape or some brightly lit architecture, I won't suggest switching to the 48 megapixel mode. The default 12 megapixel mode works just fine for almost all of the day-to-day images that most of us take. Coming to the close-up shots. The focusing speed and the minimum focusing distance on this Mi A3 doesn't seem to be as good as some of its competing smartphones. In fact, it takes quite some time to get the focus right, and most of you will notice this when you use this camera. But when it sets the focus on a particular object, the close-up shots turned out really well. The subject that I was trying to capture was very sharp, and thanks to the wide f1.79 aperture, the remaining background gets a very nice optical blur. I switched to the portrait mode whenever I have people in my shot. So how good a camera is at taking portrait shots plays a big part in deciding whether or not I am going to use a particular phone for a long time. I would say the Mi A3 does a fairly good job with these portrait shots. I won't call it the best because it does need some refinements via software updates so it can get the edge detection right. But the subject of your portrait shot is perfectly sharp and the overall images look really pleasing. I would just like the edge detection to get a bit more refined and the exposure of the background to be put in check in the next software update. This edge detection gets much more accurate when we start taking portrait shots of non-human subjects. I don't know why, but this is the case with almost all of the phones that I test. Maybe it is because the edges of these objects are better defined. I hope the manufacturers can take this kind of edge detection and somehow use it while taking portraits of humans as well. Now let us look at the images that are taken indoors, artificial and low lighting conditions. There are plenty of details even when we take images indoors when there is a lot of light around. There is a bit of noise in the darker parts, especially if you have the HDR mode turned on, since the phone tries to add in more light to the shadows or the darker parts, but the noise is not too much at this stage. As we move to even low lighting areas, the Mi A3 still captures a lot of details. The focusing issue again comes into play in these lower lighting areas, where it takes a bit more time to latch on to the focus. You do get the night mode, which lets you take much better and brighter images than the auto mode. You can look at the difference that the night mode makes when we see these images side by side. You can take these night mode shots of any low lighting situations, and the results will most definitely be better than any of the auto mode images that you take in these situations. There is obviously more noise in these night mode images. I don't know about you guys, but I will much rather prefer noisy images that look like this to having darker images with lower noise but barely anything to see. You should also know that these night mode images do take a few moments to capture, so if you have anything or anyone moving in the scene, they will be blurred out. So whenever you are capturing night mode images with people in them, ask them to be still for about 2 to 3 seconds. For a phone which starts at around 13,000 rupees, I would say the Mi A3 has got an impressive low light camera. That brings us to the front facing camera. It is a 32 megapixel sensor, which means the image sizes are huge, but it also means there are plenty of details in these selfies. It seems to be showing accurate colors for the most part, but some of these images seem to be a bit too sharp for my liking. HDR mode makes sure that the selfies are well exposed in most backlit conditions. There is no depth sensor at the front, so blurring for the portrait selfies is achieved via software, and it seems to be doing a pretty good job of separating the subject from the background. It does miss out on certain strands of hair here and there, but I think most of you will be happy with the kind of selfies and portrait selfies that this Mi A3 can take. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the Mi A3. You can see how it is handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I am walking around with it. This phone can shoot 4K 30fps videos, and here are a few examples of it. What is even cooler is that you can shoot these videos with the wide lens as well. There is no electronic stabilization while shooting 4K videos, but this stabilization kicks in while shooting 1080p and 720p 30fps videos. There are options to shoot 1080p slow motion videos at 120fps. And if you are willing to go down to 720p resolution, it even lets you shoot 240fps slow motion videos. Now this Mi A3 is not the best when it comes to shooting videos, but it will still get the job done. So after taking and looking at all these image and video samples, I think the Mi A3 has got a good set of cameras. Xiaomi needs to fix a few issues like the exposure in the HDR mode and the focusing speed. If they do this with a software update in the next few days or weeks, I think the Mi A3 could very well be one of the best camera phones in under 15,000 rupees. On its own, this Mi A3 has got a really good set of cameras. But nowadays, everyone will judge a smartphone's camera performance in comparison to some other phone in the same price range or by comparing it to its predecessor. So to see where does the Mi A3 stand in comparison to its competition, very soon I am going to compare its camera with the Redmi Note 7 Pro, Mi A2 and even the Realme X. So make sure you have the notifications turned on and smash that like button if you want those videos to come out very soon. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.